Thank you. Nope, you can bring them up. Thank you so much. Do you have your earbud or anything? Back the stack. Almost. She's checking just to make sure our audio's good. Mayor, we're good to go.
Good evening. Welcome to the March 27th, 2023 Board of Aldermen meeting. Now call this meeting to order. And I would ask everyone to rise and join in the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And I would ask the city clerk to call the roll.
Alderman Francisco? Here. Alderman Holman? Here. Alderman Hughes? Here. Alderman Mortland?
Here.
Alderman Perot?
Here.
And Alderman Weezahan?
Here.
I have Alderman Allen and Alderman Even as absent. Mayor Ream is presiding, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Just one brief comment before we start. It's we had another shooting in our schools today, and it's in Nashville. It's a sobering kind of event, and it seems to occur in this country too often. It's a primary care physician who deals with patients who have mental illness. I don't know the answer to the problem, and I'm only gonna talk for a second, but we have a rather robust but finite amount of mental health services, but we have the seemingly an infinite demand for them. And I don't know the answer to that, but I think all of us feel the loss to our country and our society every time an episode like that happens. There's 3 little 9-year-old kids. It's a tragedy. And again, I really, just a comment that we just pray for those families. I don't know the answer because I deal with it a lot in terms of people who are broken. And I will say, only last thing I'll say on that before we go on is that if you grew up with basically a normal mother and father, thank them for that. I'm amazed at the number of people in this country who that's not the case. So if you grew up with a normal mom and dad, say thanks mom and dad, and they say for what? Just say for being normal. It's a huge thing. And sorry for the digression. Just approve the minutes from the 2/27/23 regular meeting. Seek a motion and a second to approve.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion or amendment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And from the 3/13/23 last meeting, we didn't have an actual meeting. Seek a motion and a second to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Relative hearing from citizens, we will do that when we get to the public hearing. And we'll get to the public hearing now. Let me read that. We had a public hearing to consider a request by George Stock of Stock and Associates Incorporated, representing Lutheran Senior Services owner, for approval of zoning code amendments related to the planned development, one district LSSHC Point, for the purpose of construction of an addition located at 13190 South Iowa Road in the planned development 1 PB1 zoning district. I now declare the public hearing open, and the process will be, I will ask the city clerk to enter exhibits. The applicant will come to the podium and present. Then I will ask questions of the members of the board. And then any and all members of the public that wish to comment will be welcome to do so. So I would first ask the city clerk to enter exhibits.
Exhibit number 1 is affidavit of publication of notice of hearing, published in the St. Louis County on March 10th, 2023. Exhibit number 2 is typewritten notice of hearing, posted at the Municipal Center, on the city's website, on the subject property, and mailed to property owners within 300 feet of that property, with a list of those owners attached. Mayor, for the record, I'm going to note right now that Alderman Weezahan has recused himself and left the dais. We still have a quorum at 5. Exhibit number 3 is bill number 2314. Exhibit number 4 is formal protest petition submitted by Carmody McDonald pursuant to section 405.290 of the municipal code, which raises the approval standard to a supermajority, last dated March 20th, 2023, 37 pages. Exhibit number 5 is PowerPoint presentation from Mason Point applicant, 49 pages. Exhibit number 6 is PowerPoint presentation from the opposition. Exhibit number 7 is support letters list received by the city clerk and made available to the Board of Aldermen with a sample included. That's 3 pages. Exhibit number 8 is a list of opposition emails received by the city clerk and made available to the Board of Aldermen with a sample included. That's 6 pages. Exhibit number 9 is a general petition in opposition submitted by Carmody McDonald on March 20th, 2023. That's 10 pages. Exhibit number 10 is letter of opinion from CBIZ Valuation Group submitted by Carmody McDonald on March 27th, 2023, consisting of 10 pages. And Mayor, in addition to those 10 exhibits, I'll be entering the following comments into the record as requested by the submitters and attaching them to the minutes for tonight's meeting. Each of the emails that I'm going to reference have been distributed to the board in advance. Number 1 is from Fred Rowland, that's dated March 9th, 2023. Number 2 is from Jerry Smith, dated March 5th, 2023. Number 3 is David Snively, dated March 15th, 2023. Number 4 is Ronald Douglas, dated March 23rd, 2023. And number 5 is Alan Marquardt, dated March 24th, 2023. And that's all the exhibits I have.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'd invite the applicant to the podium to present. Mr. Redmond. Doc.
Before we start that, can I just make a quick announcement for everyone to speak into the mic up on the dais and when you're at the podium? Because the other room is only picking up from our mics.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. And my name is Drew Redmond, and I appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you today about our project at Mason Point. I am the executive director of Mason Point, and so this evening I'm going to tell you a little bit. Swipe, George, just swipe. I'm going to spend a little bit of time telling you who we are as an organization, Lutheran Senior Services, and then also who we are at Mason Point. I'm going to talk about the purpose of the project, why we're bringing this forward here today, as well as what our process has been in arriving at today. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the details of this project and where Stock is going to do the second half here. At Lutheran Senior Services, we are a nonprofit organization. We provide for over 13,000 seniors. And we provide life plan communities. And when I say the life plan community, I'm referring to a community that has independent living, assisted living memory care, and skilled nursing all under one roof. We have life plan communities in Missouri and Illinois. We also have home and community-based services, and those are services that where we go into the home and provide those in a person's home. And we also have affordable housing for those that income restricted incomes. And so we are a faith-based organization centered in Christ. Together we create places, services, and opportunities for people that age well with purpose and fulfillment. And so for a minute here, I'm going to invite Julia Beekler to come up. Julia is our care center and assisted living administrator, and she's just going to tell you a little bit about the heart of our communities.
Hello, thank you for having me. Like Drew said, my name is Julia Beekler. I've been at Mason Point for about 4 years now. Prior to Mason Point, I worked for a for-profit skilled nursing rehab for 11 years as a clinician, an operator, and an advocate for older adults. I hold a master's degree in speech language pathology, and I am licensed in Missouri as a nursing home administrator. After 11 years operating in a different model that was driven off census and less about the holistic well-being care of older adults, I felt a need to change course to align with my values of care. LSS has provided an opportunity to marry my passion of serving older adults, spiritual practice, and clinical excellence. My goal this evening is to provide a snapshot behind the why of our operation. Healthcare is complicated, it's laced with a lot of abbreviations. So in order to kind of best describe our practice, I want to give you a hypothetical example of a common occurrence in our community. So I'm going to walk you through an example, like I said, but this is hypothetical. One of our independent residents, she woke up, she's making a cup of coffee and trips over the throw rug in her kitchen. This unfortunately results in a hip fracture. At the hospital, the social worker tells her that most rehab facilities in West County are at capacity and getting into a rehab facility will be difficult. Our resident tells them that they are a resident at Mason Point. The social worker then says, well, that changes everything. She presents our resident with two options, both under the Mason Point roof. She could return to her home in independent living and have Lutheran Senior Services Home Health provide nurse visits, physical therapy, occupational therapy that could take place within her home. She can follow up with her physician regularly in our Mason Point clinic. Furthermore, our resident could have meals delivered to their home from a Mason Point dining venue and continue with her regular home cleaning provided by Mason Point housekeeping 2 times per week. She could add additional services if needed and have LSS private duty come to her home and help with showering and bathing. Our resident selects option 2. Again, it's under the same roof. The hospital contacts Mason Point Skilled Rehab and we arrange for our resident to come to our rehab section for intense physical therapy and occupational therapy. We pick up our resident in our Mason Point transportation and she returns to our rehab neighborhood. Our resident rehabs under the care of our physicians and a dedicated clinical team, focusing on pain management, nutrition, mobility, and wellness. After a week, the therapist completes a home evaluation of her independent living home, and modifications are made to ensure safety and aid in the recovery process. Our Mason Point social workers coordinate additional equipment that is now needed in the independent living home and provide support, guidance to our resident and their family members. Our resident is discharged from our skilled nursing rehab and makes the 5-minute walk back to her home. She is welcomed back by her friends, community, and staff in independent living. All these services are under one roof, one care model, and one clinical team. Our resident stays at Mason Point are filled with Bible study, guest speakers, sit and stretch, glamour day, music entertainment, painting, rosary, volunteers, Tai Chi, and family meals. You will also see medication passes, wound care, physician visits, x-rays, Dopplers, lab monitoring, tube feedings, dementia care, and a variety of skilled clinical care. We are privileged to serve older adults from being independent all the way to end-of-life hospice care. We can deliver home health, inpatient rehab, memory care, hospice care, and private duty care. We employ registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, nurse aides, social workers, certified med techs, maintenance, housekeepers, chefs, servers, life enrichment coordinators, and chauffeurs, all for the sole purpose to serve older adults and make their lives full and active.
Thanks, Julia. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of who we are as an organization and what we do. Just to tell you where we serve, our life plan communities are primarily located in the St. Louis metro area. We do have a community in Columbia, Missouri. We have one in Springfield, Illinois, as well as Peoria, Illinois. And then for our affordable housings, those are located primarily in the St. Louis metro. We do go as far as Belleville, Illinois. And so the project, again, that we're talking about today, obviously, is from Mason Point. So some of you are probably familiar with the history of our community, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But wanted to bring pictures just for those who maybe visited it several years ago before we were the owner. A lot of these pictures are updated since we did our project in 2018. And so on the screen here, I've got a picture of our chapel where we do our worship services, Bible studies, services throughout the week. We've got a pool there for our water volleyball team that uses that, as well as water aerobics. We've got a movie theater where we stream movies on Fridays and Saturday nights. And up here now, we have pictures of the various dining venues that we have in our community. So when you move into one of our communities, typically our residents pay between $300,000 and $500,000 entrance fee. And then in addition to that, there's a monthly service fee. And out of that monthly service fee, that goes to pay for what we refer to as their dining allowance. And so we have all those services on site for residents to go and eat lunch, dinner, breakfast. So it looks substantially different than it did prior to the time that we owned it. So we purchased the property in 2016 from the Cedars of Town and Country, and we began operating it as Mason Point. And since that time, we have undergone substantial renovations to the interior space of the building, upgraded the building maintenance, building amenities and infrastructure. There was pretty significant deferred maintenance on the building when we acquired it. So really it's been a journey of improvement since that time. In 2018, we started building our independent living expansion project. We opened in 2020, and our independent living reached 100% capacity in 2021. And so it kind of leads us to today. We're the third owner of this community, and the model that was operated by originally the JCA, eventually Cedars of Town and Country, was not a sustainable model. Our campus is a very large care center with a relatively small assisted living, and then of course we added the independent living in 2020. And so really the skilled nursing takes up a substantial amount of the square footage on our campus. And so what this project is seeking to do, we want to reposition our unit mix to better serve the needs and preferences of today's seniors. And so what we're going to show you with this project tonight is, and we want to do renovations in the skilled nursing area to be able to offer more assisted living and bring assisted living memory care to our campus, which we do not have today. A dedicated assisted living memory care. And then also we are seeking to build a new independent living, 75 apartments on the site of what is assisted living today. And so really one of the primary reasons for this is because we have more skilled nursing today than there's an interest in the market. We're seeing more and more people are choosing to bring services into their home. And so what that means, when I say home, that means out in the community, people are choosing to remain at home longer. For us and what we do, home could mean independent living. More and more we see residents choosing to bring private duty services into their independent living apartments. Whereas 5 years ago, those same residents might have moved to assisted living. The same is true in assisted living. We see more and more where residents are bringing services to them in assisted living in order to delay the time to go to skilled nursing. And so I don't think I mentioned it, but we've also had a wait list on our assisted living since 2019. And in independent living, I mentioned we started a waiting list in 2021. We have over 140 households today on that wait list that have said, we want to move into your community, but you don't have a place for us to go. And so I want to talk directly to the opposition of this project tonight, because I feel that it's pretty well known amongst all of us. And so, I want to present the other side, our side of those talking points, because we have a significantly different view of it than does our opposition. And so one of the things that's being discussed talks about traffic and noise, that as a result of this project, there's going to be more traffic and noise on campus. And we disagree with this. We actually project to reduce it because we're going to be reducing the total number of units on campus. Today we have 432 units. At the conclusion of this project, we'll have 378. And we arrived at that because of the reduction in skilled nursing is greater than the increase in assisted living and independent living. There's discussion around increased utilization of EMS services. We disagree with that. Again, with our reduction in skilled nursing residents are historically the highest utilizer of EMS services. Those are folks with more comorbidities that are more frail resident. And so in our experience, we see that population utilizing EMS services much more than assisted living and independent living. The other thing that's being talked about is somehow that we're not paying our fair share as a nonprofit. And, you know, we want to point out a few things that we feel are important. These projects alone, and when I say projects, the project tonight that we're presenting to you, the independent living, but also the renovations that are occurring in the rest of the building, those projects bring over $200,000 in fees to the city of Town and Country. In addition to that, at planning and zoning, I was asked, you know, what percentage of your residents come from Town and Country? And so we went back and we looked at the numbers, and that number is about a third of our residents were residents of Town and Country prior to moving into our community. And so I think the mayor, I think you pointed out last time that sales tax is what funds a lot of the city operations. And so I would point to that number and say 2/3 of the residents that move into our community moved in from other municipalities. And people tend to shop locally, and so we make the case that leads to increased sales tax collected in the city of Town and Country. In addition to that, when the city receives federal and state dollars, those are typically paid out on a per capita basis. And so as we bring more people into the municipality, that means more money for the city of Town and Country. And so the suggestion that somehow we're not paying our fair share, we disagree with that. There's a talking point saying that we're removing hundreds of large trees. We don't believe that's true. We have a different view on that. You know, we're gonna have 66 more trees on our campus at the end of this project than we have today. And George is gonna talk in greater detail about those trees. There's talk that we are transitioning from a senior living community to an apartment complex. We're a senior living organization, and our community is a life plan community today. We believe we're a life plan community that you want to have in Town and Country. We believe we provide a high quality level of service to our residents. We believe we've got wonderful amenities, that a place that the residents in Town and Country want to go. We will still have skilled nursing at the end of this project. People see the reduction in skilled nursing and I think that we're somehow exiting that business. And I just want to make clear that we intend to be a life plan community for the long term. It's what our organization does. We serve seniors. The other point that I want to make is that we are not a run-of-the-mill apartment complex. I mentioned earlier that the entrance fees that our residents pay when they move into our community, they're substantial, between $300,000 and $500,000. And then in addition to that, a monthly service fee. You don't typically pay that when you move into an apartment complex. We provide 2 times per month housekeeping services for our residents, 24-hour security. Residents can see their primary care physician on site without leaving the building. We have a company that does lab draws, and they go to the resident's apartment and draw all their labs. I don't know if you've been to LabCorp lately, but that's a pretty good service that you don't find in most apartment complexes. And then finally, under this bullet, we serve older adults 62 and older. There is an age restriction in our communities. And then finally, the issue of broken promises. In planning zoning, there was, I believe the minutes from the 2018 meeting were read. There's been a number of unforeseen changes since that time. You know, when we presented that project in 2018, we had no intention of being here today to present this project to you. Our industry changed dramatically when COVID, the pandemic happened. Skilled nursing, no one's ever excited to move into skilled nursing, right? Nobody's jumping up and down saying, I can't wait to move into skilled nursing. Well, we all see the same headlines, and that people, it made people rethink communal living, especially communal living when you have comorbidities or you're in a compromised state of health. And so that's really where we started to see the uptick in interest in bringing services to where they live in their home. And it's why we come to you today to try to offer more of that level of service on our campus. We don't believe we can ever use the amount of skilled nursing. The market is not there for the number of skilled nursing beds that we have. And we believe your residents in this city want us to provide more assisted living, more independent living, and we believe that's demonstrated through the interest. The other thing that we want to clarify the record about relates to the website that our opposition has started. I draw your attention to the bottom line there. The trees being removed are marked in red is what's on the website. That's our drawing up there. Those trees marked in red are trees that we surveyed based on the feedback from our neighbors that came out of a meeting with the neighbors. And so that's misleading. That information is factually inaccurate.
Drew, could you go back to that? Could you tell me what the trees in red do mean, one way or the other?
George, you want to
They
take it?
remain. They remain. They stay in place.
Also from the website, the talk around becoming an apartment complex. The last couple lines there mentioned that we've applied for a liquor license, implying, I guess, that we're transitioning that way. We've held a liquor license since 2020. And as I mentioned earlier, we're much different than a run-of-the-mill apartment complex. And then this is another shot from the website that talks about that we plan to cut through the existing berm that currently acts as a barrier. We are maintaining the boundary. We are not cutting into the berm. And in fact, we're enhancing the boundary between us and our residents to more than accommodate for the 13 additional feet that we're going up in height. And so now I wanted to just address that directly so that you can hear our side of those issues. I want to start to talk about this project. And so this gives you the unit mix change or the numbers associated with this project. And so what it's showing you is that we are seeking to increase the number of independent living apartments that we have. We're seeking to increase the assisted living apartments, bringing dedicated assisted living memory care to our campus, and a substantial reduction in the number of skilled nursing units. And so it takes our total number of units from 432 down to 378. This is our existing site plan today. And George has got the pointer on the building that we are seeking to demo and replace with the independent living expansion. Although it's not a part of this, I think it's important to point out, George, can you point to the top two buildings? These are the areas where a lot of that renovation is going to occur. Thanks, George. These are the areas that we're talking about renovating. All this is skilled nursing basically today. And so these residents, after we renovate this section, they will move into these areas. And that's when we would demo this building and build the independent living. So it's converting all this skilled nursing square footage to be able to offer more assisted living and bring dedicated assisted living memory care to our campus. And so I'm going to talk about the process that we use. This is the original proposal at meeting one that we had with our neighbors. The final building that we're going to land on today is different than what I showed here. But that's where we started. And again, we're seeking to demo our existing assisted living building, build a three-story independent living building with 75 units and underground parking. We're seeking to move the existing loop access road 147 feet to the south to accommodate the new building, and then build a new 3-level retaining wall to accommodate the new access road. This was the original proposed details that I just talked through. And so we invited area trustees and neighbors within 300 feet of our property line, as well as aldermen. We hosted an initial meeting with the neighbors, and we had 2 follow-up meetings that we were based on changes we made based on their feedback, which I'll share in more detail in a minute. We had about 10 to 15 households represented at each of those meetings. We held individual meetings, and actually since planning and zoning, we've met with the Fairfield neighborhood where we had over 25 people in attendance. And so again, in the first meeting with our neighbors, what I have here are the primary concerns that was shared, indicated in black. And then I've got our response, what we did in response to that concern in red. And so in the first meeting, some of the concerns that came up was that the new building was taller than 55 feet. There was concern about line of sight changes due to the new building being 12 feet taller than the one that exists today. Concerns around the light levels, and concerns that we had showed 4 site sections rather than each address. And so with regard to the building height, we revised the grading on the west side of the building to reduce the building height below the 55 feet. With regard to the building being taller, we've increased the height of the retaining wall to increase the height of the existing hill. In addition to that, we're planning for 74 additional evergreen trees on top of that new hill to provide additional screening. And so those 2 things combined provides an additional 18-foot of screening in order to compensate for the additional 12 feet in the height of the building. Concerns about light levels, we completed a site photometric to verify 0-foot candles at the property line. And eventually we provided site sections for every home that had requested it, a total of 16, which I think George is going to show a little bit later in this. And so again, what we heard in meeting 1 was in black, and what we came back with in meeting 2 is what was in red. And so then when we got to meeting 2, there were a couple of new concerns that were raised. The first one, that the new building and road would be 147 feet south and past the existing ridge line. The original design did call for that. And so after that meeting, we went back with our team of engineers and construction folks, and we redesigned the building and pushed it 67 feet further north than that original design. And so we went from the building moving 147 feet south to 80 feet south, further than the existing building today. We moved the retaining wall north of the existing ridge line in order to prevent disruption to those existing barriers that I mentioned earlier. And even after the change in concern with how far south the building was going, all of a sudden we didn't want to do the work in the berm and go past the existing ridge line. We went ahead and maintained the 18 additional feet of height on that berm. There was concern around the number of existing trees that would require removal due to the newly proposed retaining wall. And so we surveyed all the existing trees to the south of the project. And those were the trees that were in red from the website that I showed a few slides ago. We moved the building, road, and retaining wall north. And so we ended up, it only required that we remove 13 trees south of the ridge line, all of which are 14-inch or smaller caliber. And so it led to a final proposal in the third meeting with the neighbors. This is the new proposal where we pushed the building back 60 feet further north than the original design. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Borstock to take you through the rest of the detail.
Thank you, Drew. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the board. For the record, my name is George Stock. I am with Stock and Associates Consulting Engineers, and my address is 257 Chesterfield Business Parkway. It's my privilege to be here tonight on behalf of Lutheran Senior Services. I'm going to go about a little bit more of a technical review. Mr. Redmond did an excellent job of the history and the meetings we had, but our request before you tonight is to amend an existing ordinance. It's the second ordinance governing this property, and also amend a final development plan. So the focus of the project is really the southwest corner of the property. Lutheran Senior Services is blessed with a rather large property with large setbacks along the south property line, the west property line, and the east property line. In our request of amending the ordinance, one of the things we're not asking is to reduce the 180-foot setback. So this is the west property line of Lutheran Senior Services. This is the south property line, and then it continues further to the south. And within the prescribed ordinance, there's a 180-foot building setback that runs around the perimeter, but which we're not asking to alter that, nor are we asking to alter or reduce the amount of green space on the property. We are asking, though, to increase the gross square footage. So the original ordinance that was approved in the late 1990s, early 2000s allowed 529,000 square feet. It was a planned ordinance. When Lutheran Senior Services came forward in 2017, 2018, that ordinance was amended and it limited the amount of square footage to 500,000. So it reduced it by 29,000 because Lutheran Senior Services wasn't asking for any more. So that's how the plan development ordinances work. You ask, site plan is part of the consideration, and then legislation is drafted to accommodate it. In our case, with this new addition, in lieu of the two-story building that you saw a moment ago, it's a three-story. And so we're asking to increase the square footage from 580 to 580,054. Now, what we're not doing, as Mr. Redmond indicated, is we're not increasing the density, the population. So the existing ordinance allows 15 beds per acre. Under this plan, we're 11.3 beds per acre. So those are the things we're not doing. What we have been doing is trying to be a good neighbor. The three meetings that Mr. Redmond pointed to demonstrate a good neighbor. It's an institution, it's a neighbor that's interested in the input of the neighbors to the south. It may not have all the history that those neighbors have in the south, and the JCA and the things that were developed. But we did listen. This is an enlarged site plan. And as Drew mentioned, the existing ring road is located right here. So the maximum that's being moved is 80 feet to the south. This is the berm, which is being actually constructed on the existing berm. So I'm going to go back one slide just to try to make this clear. So when the JCA developed the property, they built a 30 to 40 foot high berm, actually man-made fill placed right here within that setback. It terminated on its eastern point here. Going to the east was actually grading that created a slope. For those who've been out the site, you drive around the ring road, you see a slope up to your left-hand side or to the south. What we're proposing to do is, because we're moving this building back, is maintain that ridge line, not go south of the ridge line. All these shaded areas are trees. In an early version where we went back 147, we were disrupting those trees. And for that reason, we changed the plan before it came before the Planning and Zoning Commission. But we are adding 10 to 12 feet of fill on top of the existing berm and then placing the trees on top, and for a total new height of 18 feet in order to compensate for the building itself. So the building has 4 levels. It has one lower level at elevation 590, which is the garage. This would enter into the garage from the ring road. And then there's a level that's at elevation 603, 617, 625. The berm grades range from 624 all the way up to elevation 644, and you'll see that in sections. The ring road is 25 to 30 feet below. So these retaining walls, these terraced retaining walls, are only visible if you're inside or north of the ring road looking to the south. They are not visible to the residents. So what we've done is created this barrier in order to mitigate for the additional height of the building. So this slide right here is what's there today. So again, there's the ring road, and this is the slope that you see as you drive around the ring road, and then all the trees were surveyed in. And again, this was a work in progress. This was after the meeting with the residents. We had flagged and staked things out there so they could see what we were proposing. They objected. So we said, we'll get some more trees, we'll get everything located, and those are the trees, all those little that are remaining, not to be disturbed. Again, the ring road, which is located here, will move at the greatest point 80 feet to the south, and then tie back in here at the west and tie back in here at the east. The trees being removed, there's a total of 97 trees being removed. 13 are south of the ridge line, 84 are north of the ridge line, and 0 of the trees being removed are landmark trees. So the trees being removed south of the ridge line comprise of 1 6-inch, 2 8-inch, 5 10-inch, 4 12-inch, and 1 14-inch caliber tree. So this slide's a lot like the poster where the trees were in red. In this case, they're in black. That's just the different layers. But these are all those surveyed trees which remain and stay in place. The limits of our disturbance is really these black lines, which are the contours, which are running around the perimeter of the property. So again, you have the ring road, you have the building in its new configuration as it had been slid further to the north, and you have the 180-foot building line, which we're adhering to. So again, when you look at the property, there's quite a bit of depth. There's so much depth that Lutheran Senior Services owns, it's cut off this slide. I'll have a later slide with dimensions so you can see how many hundred of feet the building is away from the property lines. So as part of the new trees and installing, there's 160 new trees for a net gain of 66 on the property. And 74 of those trees will be evergreens planted on top of the new walls, provide additional year-round screening over and above what exists today. So here's a legend of the trees. So there's a number of trees that will grow to a height of under 30 feet. There's those trees that will grow to 30 to 45, and there's those that will grow greater than 45. Here's the quantity of the trees and then the species. There's a combination of junipers, arborvitaes, redbud, serviceberries, magnolias, cypress, maple, plane tree, ginkgos. The minimum size on those are 8 feet on the evergreens and 2-inch on the 2 to 3-inch on the deciduous trees. So this is that plan that was first objected to. This is just an overlay. So this is what we came to the residents with initially, and this was the extent of the ring road being slid and the retaining wall. So this was the 147 feet going further to the back, and then what's in black is the new plan. So you can see where the ring road was first presented, and then presented in the fashion which stays above this ridge line, stays north of the ridge line. So this is an overview. As Mr. Redmond indicated earlier, this is the portion of the existing building. This is an aerial photograph that's being removed, and it's being replaced with this L-shaped building or horseshoe building with an open courtyard visible out. Some surface parking is being displaced that exists today here. Porte cochere that's on the side of the building is being removed and replaced by pickleball court. The original proposal that we had presented had the pickleball court here. There was some concerns with noise, so we've isolated the pickleball to be within inside limits, protecting it from the residents. Again, this in context should really show you, and those of you that are familiar, have been driven out there, you'll understand. Here's the ring road, and then here's the proposed ring road. And then there's the vegetated berm that goes to the west, and then the high ground berm as it continues to the east. So everything we're doing is at the ridge plus 18 feet, and then sloping back down to the ring road such that the building's tucked down underneath your access to the garage. This is our landscape plan I did just gone through. 74 of those trees and the deciduous are really being placed along the berm. As we go along the east, the topography changes, and you'll see that. The homes that are here sit above the property, and the retaining walls actually are retaining the low ground that's off their property. So in this case, the retaining wall stops, and this is being supplemented with the green giant arborvitaes here to provide the buffering for the building portion, which is displacing the car parking that's located there today. So the ridge line, and again, we'll see in another drawing. What's in green, that is the center of the man-made berm, which stops right here. And then this is the ridge line that exists from the original construction. And so these contours that are here are actually elevating that 12 feet and then the 8 foot of evergreens being placed on top. So this is a little bit about the architecture. It looks a lot like what's out there today facing the highway. The top slide is the northern version. The bottom slide is the west, so that would be the view towards the Fairfield residence. And then to the south, as I mentioned, there was that lower level, that subterranean level where the garage is. So the ring road is running right in here, and it goes down into the garage. So this is the south facing the berm. And then we have the east elevation, which is located here. Again, the architecture mimics what was recently constructed on the western portion of the campus. This is a 3D perspective, a bird's eye view, basically above the berm, probably way above the berm, from the southwest looking northeast. So again, you see the west face of the building. You come around the south side, you see the lower level into the garage. You have the ring road. You have the open courtyard, which is really important, for the residents living here, not to have that isolated, but to have it open. There's some amenities in there, stormwater management, and then the ring road. And then what you really see here are those retaining walls that we've been talking about, which are facing to the north. So you don't see those retaining walls from the south. A little bit about the parking. There's 400 spaces that are required. Existing, there's 537, of which 379 are surface and 158 are garage. So we're proposing 52 of the surface spaces to be removed. Generally, that's where the porte-cochere is in that east wing. And then we're adding 84 garage spaces below. So the total parking would be 569, of which 327 are surface and 242 are parking, and there's 4 existing loading. So there's more than enough parking on site. There's some concerns about off-site parking, but we're very comfortable with the amount of parking. And the green space, as I mentioned, in that governing ordinance, there's a 60% requirement, and we're at 62.66 green space. So a little bit about the woodlands. Existing woodlands on site is 11.02. The allowable amount to be removed is 50%. That would be 5.51 acres. What's being proposed is 0.46 acres. So what is remaining is 10.56. So the percentage being removed is 4.17%. So a very small percentage of woodlands being removed. So these are the site sections, and what this drawing is the topographies. So the green lines that you see are the existing elevations. And what's very distinct is that berm. And when that berm was constructed, 30 to 40 feet tall, it was generally north of the residential properties. And then to the east, it stopped being a berm being built and it was a cut slope. The ridge today, the existing ridge runs like this. And so everything from this point going south falls back down to the lake. From the center of the berm falls back down. So we're not proposing to do any improvements or any changes to the berm from this point. The improvements go from this point, continuing to the east, just where the project is located. So what we did here was in an effort to try to address the building moving further to the south and the addition of a third story 12 feet, was look at horizontally how far the residential properties are from the building and then take into account the topography and what we're mitigating. And so, well, this first slide, our homes at 736 Fairfield Lake Drive, 829, 815, and 801 Mason Wood, 801 Mason Wood Drive, and 807. So going from top to bottom or counterclockwise will be these sections that I'll show in a moment. So when we did these, we superimposed the first building image that we were proposing on the site, and that is outlined in the dash lines. So that was the position of the first building, which was 147 feet before we moved it back to where we're the 80 feet. And so the proposed building in the current condition is what's shown here, and then what's existing there today is shown in shaded. And so what we've done is we've gone back to those residential properties. So this on the left-hand side is basically a home at 736 Fairfield. That's the first floor. And then we look at a line of sight traveling both through the Fairfield property and onto the Lutheran Senior Services property until the building. In this case, this is an area where you're just north of the berm and you're basically looking due east. So you don't see the berm that we're building, you just see a lot of distance. And so where the building is from that residential property, when we originally presented it, it was 879 and now it's 891 feet. And their line of sight is really obscured by a lot of existing vegetation that exists there today. And as we move, we start to get a little bit closer to the property. These are those the three Fairfield. It's a long section going from the west. There's Fairfield Terraces from west going east. It steps down the line of sight. And in this case, you start to see where we propose the berm. So this is that terrace berm. In the first scenario, it was a little bit closer to the south, and we moved it forward with the building. So this is the terrace berm. This is the landscaping area on top. In this case, this berm is actually about 20 feet high plus 8 feet. So the berm varies in height in order to provide that line of sight above the third floor of the proposed building. And in this case, the building was moved back. Then we go to the property at 801 Mason Wood. So again, the topography from their home, they sit up rather high, slopes down as you come across the property. And then you see the berm, and you see what we originally proposed was a retaining wall that was a little bit further to the south, not quite over the ridge. You see a building that was proposed a little bit closer, and in the end, through those 3 neighborhood meetings, we ended up with a building here. So in this case, this building, and I mentioned they're blessed with a lot of property, 62% green space, but the original plan had the building located 349 off Lutheran Senior Services property line, and now we're 383.50 off the property line. As we move, again, in the counterclockwise direction, and those residents start to get a little bit lower on their property, looking up towards the Lutheran Senior Services, they look north. So this property, which is 801 Mason Woods Drive, I'm sorry, we already did 801. So we're down to 800 Mason Woods Drive, a little bit lower on the site. You see the topography climbing, the landscaping, and then again, what you see is the berm being constructed above what the existing berm there is today. And then you see the ring road, and obviously you see that 10, 20, 30, 35 feet is being added on this portion of the slope. So again, through those meetings, the building got further to the north, which is further from the property. So 272 or 262 feet versus 234 feet. We did this continuing, as Mr. Redmond mentioned, we did 16 sections. So now we get into the Mason Wood Drive subdivision. So these are sections from 808, 816, 838, and then even 5 Mason Ridge Court. So we have 3 within the Mason Wood subdivision looking at the building. I think what's important in all these slides is what you see is that where we originally proposed the building to where we have the building, how we've looked at how to articulate the ground and the buffer, which is exactly which was done in 99 and 2000, was articulate, manipulate the ground, create the berm, landscape as the means to create that line of sight over the top of the roof of the new building. So here you see the existing 2-story building being demolished, the new 3-story building, and the new roof line 12 feet higher. Again, the distance is 336 feet off the property line. As we continue to the next section, very similar results. In this case, the building is now 383 feet versus 294 feet from the property line. And then we continue, and this just continues to repeat itself where we had the walls, and this I think is some of the confusion that's ongoing with relative to information being passed to residents is we did have a plan that was further to the south and had those walls and was impacting more trees. But this is the plan, what you see here, which was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission, presented to the residents in the 3rd meeting. So this information's been there for quite some time. And then we have the last section, which is the Mason. So what happens here, this is the Mason Ridge Court. So these homes are starting to sit a little bit higher. The grade drops down to the lake. And so you can see where the original walls and terrace were, and we moved them much further to the north, such that we were able to increase the building expansion to be 476 from the property line versus 391. So this is number 2, Mason Ridge Court, number 1, Mason Ridge Court, 965 Mason Ridge, 953 Mason Ridge. So these will be the last ones where we actually have the new retaining walls being added, simply because the topography changes. So we have the retaining walls again slid forward. We're providing separation of 487 feet from our common property line with the residents, where it was 405. We're adding that tree to be able to bring that line of sight above the 3rd floor of the building. Here's the existing building in the background. If we continue around, some more berming and retaining walls. increasing the setback from 3 to 340. And again, the ordinance setback's 180 feet, so you haven't seen anything that's come close to 180 feet off the property lines, west, south, or east. We're substantially further. So we go to 965 Mason Ridge. So we were 319, we're 333 feet. And then 953 Mason Ridge. So this is the last of the retaining walls. And again, the separation, 319 feet versus 306 feet. And then the final sections were those from 921 Mason Ridge to 13109 Mason Bend Lane, 13117 Mason Bend Lane, and 13125 Mason Bend. So we picked all the homes that are around basically the expansion. There are a few more homes that go to the northeast, but the expansion doesn't continue that way. So we'll just take a quick look at this. Now you see the homes are substantially higher. The retaining walls that exist have everything depressed down. There's the lower level of the garage, the one story above, and the separation is 238 versus 227. And then this east side, we go to 196 feet from the property line. And then the final section, final two sections, 188 and 193 along that east property line. But again, what we're doing is planting those junipers, those arborvitaes along that eastern property line in order to create the buffer. It's well landscaped today, but the green giants don't exist along that component. So there was a lot of time spent and a lot of care in positioning this building to try to be respectful, again, of the green space, not to have an intrusion of light or noise, the berming and the fact that the building is tucked down and the road provide those abilities to provide that protection from the neighbors. At this time, I'm going to ask that Mr. John Nations come up and make some remarks, the final member of our team.
Good evening. Honorable Mayor, members of the Board of Aldermen, my name is John Nations. Excuse me. I'm a lawyer. My firm is Doster Nations, Alderman Boyle at 16150 Main Circle Drive in Chesterfield. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. This is going to be a very unusual public hearing because the lawyer isn't going to talk nearly as long as the engineer.
Thank you.
All right, but I did want to make a few points because I think it's critical in the public hearing, particularly on a development as important as this. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to make a few points, and I'm going to make them rather briefly. First of all, your 2020 comprehensive plan, this plan is consistent with the existing land use map for senior living and skilled nursing. It is consistent with the future land use map regarding this area as employment. Your comprehensive plan identifies the property adjacent to I-6440 as a focus area, and it provides that the preferred future land use designation for the area immediately south of I-6440 is employment, which gives Town and Country the opportunity to have commercial, office, and institutional uses along the highway corridor as long as the developments maintain a contextually consistent distance from the highway. The plan calls for what it looks like from the highway, not the distance from the residents. Nevertheless, the petitioner's gone to great lengths to make sure we preserve an enormous buffer to the back. It is also consistent with your green space requirements, which require 60% in the planned district. This plan provides for 62.66. I've taken particular care to note the points of the opposition because they're always important. You have a wonderful community with a lot of interested citizens. They have concerns. They deserve to be addressed, and they deserve to be addressed by us, frankly. Part of the team has already addressed some of them, but I want to address some more of them in a little bit detail. One of their points of opposition is more commercial development. First of all, more commercial development is not a reason to turn down this development, which complies with your comprehensive plan. The plan is consistent with the development on this site going back more than half a century. If there is too much commercial development in Town and Country, which could be debatable, I guess, this property cannot be penalized for it. They talk about increased traffic and congestion. First of all, there's no traffic study to support that, and indeed, a traffic study could not support that contention. They are reducing the number of units, reducing the number of people on the site. This property is along a well-traveled outer road for an interstate highway, which has been reconstructed and then modified in the last 30 years to accommodate the traffic. This property is not required to solve traffic-related issues, which are completely unrelated to this property or to this development. They object and they say that this will decrease residential property values. That's often a concern. People care about their neighborhoods. They make big investments in them. But when looking at the evidence, I'm not sure what the evidence is to support that. In fact, the public evidence is all to the contrary. If you go to the St. Louis County's website and look at land values, which is pretty easy to do, we didn't have formal appraisals done of everybody's house. But if you take a look at what's going on in these neighborhoods, a quick survey of residential property values surrounding this site shows a dramatic increase in value since the 2017 approval and expansion. Many have increased more than 50%, with the greatest increase in value coming immediately after the project was approved and continuing until the pandemic downturn, but are now recovering. Some of the properties have sold since 2017. In fact, some have sold in the last couple of years since the last part of the project was constructed, and probably for an amount higher than the properties have ever sold for in their history. The opponents are concerned about the removal of mature trees. Not an invalid concern. But first, there will be more trees on this site than there are now. Secondly, living in this part of the region, frankly, in this part of the country, nearly every project of any type involves the removal of trees. We're blessed to have a lot of water, 4 seasons a year. We have a lot of trees. But in fact, a quick review of the historical aerial photographs of this area reveals that many were taken down to construct the homes in the nearby neighborhoods. Maybe even there were more trees taken down to allow the residential construction that have been removed from this site over the last 50 years. I studied the aerials going back to 1937. I'm a lawyer by education, but a historian by nature. There are probably more trees on the Lutheran site now than there were before construction began on this site in the late 1960s and the early 1970s. But interestingly, there are less trees in the residential neighborhoods to the south than there were 50 years ago. By the time you build streets for mansions with driveways and swimming pools and multi-car garages and appurtenant structures, you have to remove a lot of trees. And they have. The aerials will show it that that's what happened. I guess there was a concern about trees then, but those are quality residential neighborhoods. They talk about a destruction of a wildlife habitat. I tried to find a declaration that this is a wildlife habitat. I couldn't find one. Maybe there is. We'd be glad to take a look at it. They talk about broken promises from Lutheran. Lutheran has not broken any promises. They built their project just as it was approved, and no one has claimed otherwise. There are people that say not-for-profits don't add to the quality of life because they don't pay taxes. That's really a sad thing to hear. The best communities in the country have very strong nonprofit communities. Whether or not they pay taxes to a local government or the amounts at which they do is a very different thing as opposed to the value they bring to the community in terms of quality of life. In fact, we have a lot of communities around that area who pride themselves on the number of not-for-profits in their communities. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, this is a proposal to allow senior citizens to have a high quality of life in town and country. Senior citizens are the fastest growing portion of our population. The fact that the vast majority of seniors cannot afford to live to the conclusion of their lives in mansions like those built adjoining this property does not mean that they cannot be afforded the opportunity to live their senior years in great communities as close to their families and former ways of life as circumstances permit. This is one of the oldest business sites in town, what is now town and country, with a long history of being a productive part of this community. The demand for this type of living is growing. Should it be senior citizens who should be penalized by not being able to allow to live in town and country solely because the opponents want someone else to compensate for the loss of trees in their neighborhoods? Should it be senior citizens who should be penalized by opponents who wrongly claim this is an apartment complex? Should it be senior citizens who should be penalized by opponents who claim there is too much commercial development throughout the city? And should it be senior citizens who should be penalized because opponents now conveniently argue after they've moved to the city that there is too much traffic and congestion? I moved to town and country in 1979. More than half of the housing in town and country has been built since my parents were original owners in Twin Farms. I've seen subdivision after subdivision, and I see a lot of people who now take great pride in their neighborhoods in town and country, who in fact would not live in town and country if the opponents to those subdivisions had had their way during those times. Should it be senior citizens who should be penalized and prevented from enjoying their years in such a wonderful community? This is a plan which meets all of your expressed standards for this type of development, and the approval of which will continue to greatly enrich town and country and its citizens for generations to come. There is really not a lot of credible evidence to the contrary, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, on behalf of Lutheran Senior Services, our entire team, and what they bring to this community, we respectfully request that this project receive the approval of the Board of Aldermen. Thank you very much for your time.
Before I open it up to the board for questions, I do want to comment that, hey, there may be people who are opposed to it with very legitimate reasons. They're not enemies. They have just a different, I mean, I think we have to be kind of careful with rhetoric, that we're not, it's an us against them. People can disagree and still be civil. So that's really, maybe that rhetoric was a little over the top, frankly, in my opinion. Having said that, I would open it up to the board for any questions they would have for the senior service group before we go to comments from the public.
I have a question about the procedure.
Sure.
Can we come back and ask questions after we hear from the public, or do we need to do that now?
It's up to the presider. So the mayor can choose.
I mean,
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you're not gonna come back afterwards, we can do that.
I have a couple now, but I think they might build once I hear from the community. So my question was, do I have to present my questions right now? Or can we wait to hear comments from the public and then can the board ask the questions at the end of that? And
We can go that way. I'm okay with that as long as there's support, you're all right with that? Okay, fine, we'll do that. I thought what I would do next is sort of have a balance, is have, I believe Mr. Carmody is most representative of the speakers for people who are opposed to this project.
George, I got.
And since.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think so.
And I would just comment that, what we usually do is allow people 3 minutes, but I think 11 or 12 people have ceded their time to you, so you got 36, 39 minutes, and go ahead and make your presentation.
And I'll try not to use all.
That's fine.
I use 3 extra.
I'll just remind everyone, please speak into the mics, both on the dais and from the podium, so that our watchers at home and in the other room can hear.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Board of Aldermen, I'm Jerry Carmody McDonald, and represent Jim and Tricia Newell at 838 Mason Wood in connection with this project. And as a consequence of that representation, have come to know many, many, many people who are like-minded and think the way they do about this very project. I'd like to quickly address, before I get into my presentation, the comments that my friend John Nation just made, acting as if rejecting this would somehow be a disservice to senior citizens, and let's take care of them and so forth. I will tell you, look around the room. Let's look at the other room. We've got some senior citizens who don't just live in Mason Point, but also think they deserve some consideration. And I will tell you all, what happened at the P&Z when people took time out of their lives to come and express their views, and P&Z didn't have the decency to say, let's at least ask some questions, make some inquiries, find out about things that you're saying, but instead voted and said, see you around, did not do a service to the senior citizens who were there that night. So this isn't about senior citizen versus young type. This is about town and country. And this ought to be about, what does town and country get from this project? This ought to be about, what do my constituents want us to do? Why did they put me in this position? Why did I volunteer, which I congratulate you for? Why did I volunteer my time? I volunteered my time to make the hard decisions and to listen to what the people have to say. So let's talk about some of those. If we could go first to what you've seen with respect to the protest petition that was filed. Of the 32 properties within 185 feet of Mason Point, 27 have signed the official protest petition. In that petition, those people notarized copies.
I didn't, and I would be number 28.
All right, he'd be number 28. Can we give him a number somehow to make sure everybody
Sorry,
knows?
just for the record, if we could keep it to just here with who's talking, because the people at home can't see the speaker.
My apologies.
Thank you. No,
yes.
sorry, thank you.
So we have 28 who have endorsed the official protest petition in which they say, notarized signatures for all, we hereby oppose, protest, and object to the approval of a zoning code amendment to the Plan Development 1 PD1 zoning district and or any related amended final site development plan for any addition located at Mason Point. And I should add, and the city attorney will be angry with me if I don't tell you now and announce publicly, our protest petition is directed to the current site plan that is being presented. So I want that to be certain in the minutes. Let's go to what that looks like when you say, let's look at Mason Point in the big gray. Two of the properties that were within 185 feet, obviously could not sign, did not sign, and that's Mason Ridge Elementary School and West Hills Church. The one that did not sign was somebody who we had difficulty communicating with. The fact of the matter is everyone else within 185 feet of this proposed development said, no, please don't do this. Please stop this project. And you can see that surrounding that property in this photo. But it wasn't just limited to that, as you, I think, know by now. Town and country residents outside of the 185 feet also oppose this expansion. Indeed, the city has received almost 400 signatures. I would think almost an unprecedented number of signatures from town and country residents who oppose this expansion. 372 of them live outside the noticed 300 feet of the proposed expansion. Town and country residents have also submitted comments in opposition to this expansion to the city clerk and board of aldermen prior to this hearing. In indication, this isn't just not my backyard stuff. This is people who say, I live in town and country for a reason. You can talk about it all you want. You can talk about the value of the houses. The fact of the matter is, we have people who've been here for 30 or 40 years, some born here, who are still here. We have people who are very dedicated to town and country and still think the horse with the picket fence ought to be the model for what this city is all about. That is all the people that we got outside of those nearby this expansion area. Why are they so opposed? We heard some comments. I'm not going to disparage what they presented. I'm not going to disparage what they said. I'm not going to do what they did with each of their speakers. I'm going to simply tell you what the reasons are and for you to consider. The proposed expansion, for why these people are opposed to this expansion, is that it's contrary to prior promises by Mason Point that there would be no further expansion. You heard Mr. Redmond say, he admitted that. You'll see in the minutes, I'll show you in a second. Hey, times change. We made a promise. We said this is what we're going to do. We told the people sitting at the very dais where you're sitting, there will be no more expansion on this site. Well, we've had a change. Those people are now fired or gone. So therefore, we're going to go ahead and expand. That's our excuse for saying we misrepresented to the board, we misrepresented to the people, and here we are back again. 2 years they applied after they completed the construction on the west side and said, here we are again, we want more. We're going to continue to want more, and you need to give it to us. The fact of the matter is, some people here, some residents of Town and Country think your word is your bond. And whether or not you've fired employees, whether or not times have changed, you still have obligations. In fact, members of the board and mayor, in fact, there's a deed restriction for this property, which limits the size of the property to 50 feet, the height of the feet to 50 feet. They're want more than that. They're gonna get more than that. And think about for a second, the tallest that a house can be in Town and Country is 40 feet. Well, we want 50 feet, even though the tallest house in Town and Country can't be more than 40 feet. The proposed expansion, again, is a departure from prior decisions which this board has made, rejecting the expansion or development of other senior living facilities. It negatively impacts the adjoining properties. You have seen what we submitted earlier. We'll go into it more detail in a minute. We'll go into each of these in a little more detail. It's contrary to the character of Town and Country, just a plan to add apartments. That's what this is. We're gonna make more money. We're gonna do better with apartments. Nobody in the apartments is gonna pay any real estate taxes. We're not gonna pay any real estate taxes. This ain't a bad deal if they'll approve it. It does not benefit Town and Country or its residents. It's a further burden on public services. And of course, as I said, Mason Point is a tax exempt entity. Let's talk about the history of Mason Point, and again, because it had to get a certain approval from this board to begin with, because it wasn't zoned for this type of a structure, this type of a use. So they had at the very beginning to come to you, and you gave them through a PUD the ability to construct what they constructed, which was a 218,000 square foot building. Lutheran Senior Services bought the property in 2016 and quickly submitted an application for a 267,000 square foot addition. Again, 50,000 square feet more than the existing facility that they acquired. They said, we want to add. And that was just completed in late 2020. That expansion was approved by the board after LSS promised that there would be no further expansion. So what happened after that? I'm sorry, this thing is just not very quick on the draw. Here's what it said, and this board approved based upon that promise. Upon inquiry, these are the minutes of that meeting. Upon inquiry from Alderman Butler, Mr. Shadle, who then represented, was basically in Mr. Redmond's position with the then existing entity. Mr. Shadle explained that this facility is right sized for the community and would not need to expand in the future. Notwithstanding that promise, it submitted this application 2 years after the construction was completed. So what is it up to? What does Mason Point want to look like if it gets this approval? It proposes another expansion of over 95,000 square feet. If approved, Mason Point will increase in size from its original 218,000 square feet to over 580,000 square feet in a 6-year period. That's what you're being asked to bless. And I ask you all, as you think about this and analyze the facts of this case and the opposition that's been presented, to think about the message that goes with that kind of an approval. What does it tell your residents? What does it tell people who have taken the time to be here to oppose this? What does it tell the larger community? Come on down, we're gonna approve it, and we'll continue expansion. It will not agree, and the other thing to know for sure is that this issue about the past promise was brought up at one of those neighbor, I think every one of the neighbor meetings. Hey, wait a minute, didn't you say you weren't gonna expand anymore? And the answer again was, as you heard tonight, yes, the times have changed and our personnel have changed and we don't have to abide by their promises. Well, okay, if you get this, do we have a promise that you would not expand in the future? Oh no, we could never tell you that. We're not gonna tell you that. You know, it's open season essentially, and we can apply when we want to apply. Another thing that the opposition has talked about, and the people who care about town and country have talked about, is how could this board approve this kind of an application when it's rejected other similar ones? One of which was the Clarendale application in 2019. That was an application for rezoning and a preliminary site development plan to replace an existing facility that was built in 1962 and licensed for 281 skilled nursing beds with a new senior living facility of 214 beds. That change, by the way, is remarkably similar, of course, to what is being asked for here. Let's get rid of the skilled nursing beds, and we're gonna have a new senior living facility of 214 beds. What happened with that? It was withdrawn after the P&Z rejected the proposal because of the impact on neighboring properties, traffic, parking, and emergency medical services. And you'll see it in the minutes of the reasons for the rejection. So that was Clarendale in 2019. A year later, let's look at Marinaville. Application for a 7,900 square foot, 2-story addition for skilled nursing and a new freestanding 28,000 square feet assisted living building. And again, think about the size of these applications compared to what is in front of you tonight. So this size, a fraction of what we're talking about tonight was what was presented by Marinaville. No additional beds were requested. P&Z unanimously recommended approval, but the project failed by a vote of 4-3 at the Board of Aldermen in April of 2020 because of concerns that were voiced about the impact on traffic and emergency services, increase in overall density, and because the entire region is overbedded, even though no additional beds were requested. Again, how can you go to the owners of Marinaville and Clarendale and say, well, we said no to you, but we're going to say yes to Mason Point? I don't know how you can do that. Back up for 1 second here. I don't know about this one. I'm sure it's not the city's facilities, it's gotta be us. So, the question becomes, does Town and Country need, one of the factors you consider is, what is the need for the project that's before you? So let's think about what is the need for this proposed project. Town and Country, we found, has the most senior living housing facilities per capita of any St. Louis County municipality. And that is 6, and they're all listed there. And I will tell you, the suggestion that we heard tonight about the number of occupants, last at the P&Z meeting, it said most of these occupants of this facility are going to be Town and Country residents who want to sell their big houses and move to Mason Point. Not so. We determined it's not even a third of the occupants that are there. These are people coming from other places that are moving to Town and Country, not paying any taxes, and saying we're going to move into this kind of a facility. It's certainly less than a third based upon our search of the records. We were down to less than 20%, I believe. So is there a need? There's no need that you've heard. So what about the effect? Another thing for you to consider, and a significant thing to consider, is the effect on neighboring properties. Picture here is Jimmy Newell. Yes, he's here tonight. You can see Jim. Will you stand up and show my volume are standing next to that tree? And you see him standing next to a tree that is comparable to some that are being removed. Now, the fact of the matter, yes, I can go to Home Depot and I can get a pot with a little tree in it, and I can walk out to Mason Point and plant them and say, voila, we've replaced all these trees. You know and I know that that replacement is not going to be the same as what was removed. These are the kinds of trees that we're talking about. These are the type of trees that shield the Newell's property from Mason Point and are absolutely critical to their their enjoyment of their property. I need some help from my friend here. Okay, what, would you mind staying here?
Yep, I am.
Your knees maybe. We'll. So, impact on neighboring properties, again, a critical issue for you all to consider doing what you're about to do. The fact of the matter is, you've seen the opposition of the neighbors of Mason Point. 99% no. And the fact of the matter is, there's a reason why it's no. You're not hearing from anybody around there saying, go for it, this is really a good thing for all of us. The proposed expansion is going to increase the height of the new buildings to 3.
Maybe I shouldn't be up here.
We have asked for next year.
Back on track.
You rigged it up some way. didn't you?
Sorry.
Scoop that way a little bit so it doesn't
Are we okay, Erica?
Yep.
All right. My paralegal, by the way, so
Not tech.
generally does a very, very good job.
Not, just let me throw that out there.
The proposed expansion, again, is going to increase the height of the new buildings to 3 stories from the current 2. It's going to move the main road, say what they all will, but it's going to move that main ring road that services the entire property 80 feet closer to the neighbors' homes. And it's going to negatively affect the value of neighboring properties. I don't know how they could deny that. That is the only evidence you're going to hear or you're going to have seen. And if we can take a look at the next slide, we'll see that there is what we submitted today, which is an opinion from Linda Atkinson, a real estate appraiser in St. Louis who's done a lot of work in and around St. Louis for over 35 years valuing properties. And she concluded after interviewing real estate agents and brokers that she knows with current listings in this area, after talking to them, they all indicated that the reduction of the buffer and the direct view of the commercial property would negatively impact the value of the real estate. So you have no question in her mind that there's going to be a negative impact on the value of the property if this project is approved. Her opinion is that, quote, the proposed development would likely negatively impact the value of those residential properties that will experience a reduction of the buffer zone and have direct visibility to the proposed development. Erica, should I try this again? All right, so let's go back to 2017. And during the public hearing on the 2017 expansion, residents of Fairfield expressed concern. What are we going to be looking at if you approve this project, the western side? What are we going to see? You know, we bought our places. We look out on what you'll see in a second is what they look out on. What's going to happen to us? There's a reason we located here. And so after they expressed the concern over the height of the building and its impact, we saw some photographs, and LSS came to this hearing and entered a photograph into evidence at the public hearing, claiming that this would be Fairfield's view of the Mason Point property once the project was completed. Here's that photograph, exhibit number 7. Okay, the representation to you all, those sitting in your chairs, was that this is what it will look like when you look over towards Mason Point after we complete the western expansion. Well, let's take a look at what really happened. That never turned out to be true. That was not the way it looked. Here is a before looking out from one spot there, and then from the same spot, from the same photo, here's the way it looks afterwards, looking out at the same spot. Another slide.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Here's the before of Mason Point. Again, a look out. That light that you see there is just like a security light that's out there, and that was all that it was. You'll hear from Trent Felt, as a matter of fact, who may tell you exactly that. after the expansion. Take the same shot from there, and that's the site of Mason Point today.
Where's the tree?
Yeah,
Comments to the speaker.
Mason Point expansion is contrary to the character, frankly, of Town and Country. The city of Town and Country, here's what it's supposed to be. This is the image, this is what it represents. And this is not what the character is supposed to be. The question becomes, what is this doing? What would this do for the city of Town and Country? Mason Point is independent living is for apartments. You're gonna hear more about that. What we kept hearing more and more and more is that we don't have apartments in Town and Country. We don't have apartments here. And no matter how they try to dress it up, what they sell and what they are selling is apartments. Whether they're $300,000 apartments, 200,000 or whatever, they're still apartments. And that's what they say, you open that door and continue to leave it open, and that spells for a different Town and Country than they know. It offers now 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. Phase 2, completed in fall of 2020, created additional 156 apartments. Mason Point now wants to add an additional 75, so there'll be a total of 231 apartments. This is an apartment complex. It's gonna have pickleball, it's gonna have bocce courts, it's got a bar, it's got everything that you would wanna have in an apartment complex. But that's not what it should be, and what should be in Town and Country. They market as the apartments you can see, Appaloosa, you can get Highlander, 2 bedrooms, Palomino, Sandalwood. All of these various apartments they have is how they're selling them. This is it, these are apartments, come and get them. And we want more, and we want to sell more, and we want you to come and get them. What is the benefit, I think, as I said at the end of the day, what is the benefit of all this to Town and Country? The answer is nothing. The answer is consistency, frankly, with what you've done before, what you've said before. The fact of the matter is they have an existing facility. You approve this expansion, what are you gonna do the next go around and the next go around? They made a promise to you the last time, and you're gonna say, we're just gonna close our ears to it and we just don't care? I doubt it. Town and Country and its residents will bear the burden of all this, but all of the benefit goes to a single entity, and that's Lutheran Senior Services. The negative impact, to conclude, the negative impact on Town and Country and its residents is great, including the burden on public services, increased traffic, changes to the character of the area, eliminates green space and destroys mature landscaping, decreases neighboring property values, and no real estate tax revenue to show for it. I urge you, we urge you, to consider the feelings and the genuinely heartfelt analysis that you're going to hear about in a few minutes from our other speakers, and understand we could have packed this place. We could have had more people here that you would want to hear. We've tried to abbreviate the comments to a point. We know you understand the issues. We know what they are. We think you would share the same issues in their position. And we ask you to listen to the wishes of your constituents and deny this request. Our next speaker, if you want me, Mayor, do you want us to go next?
The only comment I have, thank you for your presentation. You obviously don't know the members of P&Z. I've been privileged to work with them. They're hardworking, they're thoughtful, they're insightful, and I do not appreciate you throwing them under the bus. They're hardworking people, and they do this for free, and they take a hell of a lot of abuse.
And Mr. Mayor, I did not do it for that reason, to throw them under the bus or to have any, because they are volunteers. And I said that night, and I'll repeat it right now. These are people who are dedicating their time to do a job. I simply have to repeat to you that people who showed up and expressed concerns that were ignored, it's one thing to say, can we just take a look and vote next week? That's all I'm saying. I think that it was poor judgment on their part, that I am by no means disparaging a single one of them.
I just want to be clear.
I
Thank you very
understand.
much. Thanks. Thank you, and again, thank you for taking the time and for going through that presentation. I appreciate it. And I will just go through, we go at 3 minutes per person. We have roughly about an hour and a half worth of people speaking. So I would like everyone to, if you can, keep it to 3 minutes, and I'm all for being passionate. Be
Did you say
passionate,
that you wanted to,
be civil.
excuse me, but did you want to ask questions now that his presentation is
I-
over?
I thought we'd just go through all the comments and ask the questions at the end. And the first is Trish Newell, please. And I think the protocol is you give your name and your address when you speak.
My name is Tricia Newell. I live at 838 Masonwood Drive. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My son and my husband have given me the time. Is
That's
that, okay?
That's
I
good.
just wanted to, I'm half Cuban, so I speak loud and quickly, and I apologize for any headache you may get. Like I said, I live at 838 Masonwood Drive, and I have done so for the past 30 years. My husband, having moved there before he met me, the joy of his life, right? Yeah.
Only one answer to that question.
Yeah, we may have to answer it under duress, okay. One takes what one can get. Okay, so, he's lived there for over 35 years. So, we built a home, we brought up a beautiful family there, and we've worked really hard for what we have. We care about what happens to us, we care about our neighbors, we care about our community. The relentless expansion of Mason Point truly concerns us. We have been actively working and negotiating with the various nursing home properties, whether it was the JCA or LSS, for the past 35 years. We've been very cooperative neighbors, working with that property owner to ensure the satisfaction of all the parties. We really have tried to be fair. And in the past, LSS did the same. So my husband and I were very surprised to receive the news in late October that not only were they planning to expand yet again, but they had already submitted the plans to Town and Country without any input from the adjoining neighbors. Since learning about these plans, our family has pretty much put everything we can on the back burner. Business trips, family vacations, everything we could cancel or put on hold, we did. This is a huge priority to us, and we want to make sure that we do everything we can to protect ourselves and our neighbors. My husband and I are not of unlimited means. We do not have the deep pockets of the $250 million organization that is Lutheran Senior Services. They want to expand an already huge development with no less than 9 additional senior living facilities minutes from us. Their senior living facilities minutes from us. That's not including the other independent nursing facilities in Town and Country. We just want to protect our home. We want to protect our neighbor's home. We want to protect the integrity of our community. Since the beginning, my husband and I have really felt much like David versus Goliath. We don't have the power that LSS money brings to the table. What we do have is a great group of neighbors and residents who join us in opposing this plan. We sincerely hope that you, our elected aldermen, hear us. When LSS decided to expand in 2017, they came to the neighbors with their plans, and there were many of us who were not excited to see another struggle ahead of us. We went through the plans. We weren't thrilled, but LSS promised the neighbors that if we conceded to these plans, that would be it. There would be no more further expansions, and that is statement, as we all know, is a matter of public record. And we told them, look, we're not thrilled with these plans, but we're not going to actively oppose them if this is it. After 35 years, I mean, Jimmy and I, after 35 years of fighting and negotiating and back and forth and worrying, and it's very attractive to not have to worry about that anymore, for this finally to be done. We conceded. Were we naive? Were we stupid? I don't know. We're here again today with plans that are even more invasive, on the table. And if you approve these newest plans, what will they come back with in 2 or 3 years? They're gonna be asking for more. What's it gonna be next time? With the last expansion, LSS, said that the neighboring homes would not be able to see the development. Now, Jerry, Mr. Cardy showed us the homes, pictures in Fairfield, and I know that people were like, well, that's summer, and, everything, one picture doesn't, but the winter pictures depict what actually happened. It's a huge change from what they had, and if that doesn't decrease your property value, I don't know what does. Mason Point is right on top of those homes in Fairfield. With these newest plans, they're promising us the same thing. I think Mason Point, we're not exactly convinced, let's put it mildly. Actions speak louder than words, and we're looking at what has happened to other neighbors. As I previously mentioned, my husband and I initially heard about the newest expansion via a letter in late October from Mason Point, and they let us know that that informational meeting would be held on the 2nd of November. We were actually leaving town, but we delayed our plans as much as we could to try and meet with somebody from LSS before we left. And Mr. Greg Rule, whose name was on the letter, and another gentleman, Chris, and I didn't get his last name, they hosted my husband and myself, and we looked at the plans on the projection system. I'm not very technical. And they assured us that the construction south would not go past that hilled lawn area that you see on the plans. We felt a lot better after we left that meeting. We were actually relieved, but we decided to follow that old Russian proverb that Ronald Reagan made famous: trust but verify. So we immediately went to, we came here, the municipal center, and looked at the plans, and we saw that they actually intended to go well past that lawn area into the woods, taking out hundreds of trees. Now, that plan has been amended, but that was their initial plan, that they gave to Town and Country without asking any of the neighbors. So we were worried. The plan stated that only existing young woodlands would be removed to build a proposed retaining wall. My husband and son, you saw my son on the picture, went through that area and took photographs of huge mature trees that were going to be cut down. And Mr. Stock did state at the P&Z meeting in February that they had indeed made a mistake labeling those young woodlands. But if we had trusted their word, what would have happened? More misinformation. So in the current plans, it states that trees 20 inches and more are considered grand trees, and any of those being removed should during construction are required to be replaced. On the plans, LSS states that there are 0 grand trees being removed, and that is not true. On the hard copy, there are X's on the trees that are going to be removed, but they are over the size of the tree, so you can't see the size of the tree. On the electronic copy, you can see the size of the tree, and there are 20-inch trees that are going to be removed. Those are considered grand trees, and they will be removed. More misinformation, more inaccuracies. At this point, I don't think that any one of you can blame us for our deep skepticism of Mason Point. One falsehood after another, and I am in no way saying it's intentional, but I just have to look at the facts. One falsehood after another where there, shows us a disturbing pattern. The bottom line is we can't trust them. We can't trust them. And you're our mouthpieces, our representatives, and we hope that you hear your constituents and that you seriously consider our concerns about this expansion plan. We ask that you vote this down. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments. First one I have is Matt Smith.
Go ahead.
Thank you. It's Matt Smith, I live at 815 Masonwood Drive. I've been a town and country resident for nearly all my life. After growing up on Masonwood Drive, I recently moved back into the neighborhood, in part because I love the private nature of the street and community. I speak in opposition of the request in front of you. I believe we've heard that property values will certainly be impacted. The mitigation measures will not offset the impact of tearing down a two-story building, expanding with a larger and taller building. If you look at the sightline demonstrations provided to us, they do a nice job of showing looking through the trees, and I think we saw a picture of what it looks like to look through trees in a building. Also, I do not believe there is a public need. I think we've seen examples of the rejection of similar projects based on that basis as well. And third, I believe it's very important to note that this is the first time in my lifetime that this property has come to this committee without the neighbors' support. I've been alive for 38 years. My parents have fought this battle all 38 years. This is the very first time it's made it to the Board of Aldermen without the neighbors' support. I'll yield back my time. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. Next is Trent Phelps.
You've seen it before.
Thank you very much for letting me speak. I appreciate it. I live at 738 Fairfield Lake Drive. I've been a town and country resident for 18 years. When Mason Point expanded in 2017, myself and the other Fairfield residents were shown similar sightlines as to what we've seen tonight, showing trees above the buildings. We were told that the light at night would be insignificant and that we would be able to continue to enjoy the peacefulness of our lake. You've seen the pictures this evening of what it actually looks like every night. And that picture was taken from my deck a couple of weeks ago. And you can see that what they promised us was not delivered. I look at that view every night, and it's often punctuated with flashing lights from the ambulances and fire trucks who come to the west end of LSS at least every other day, according to the fire department. Condos like mine on the lake at Fairfield used to go for a premium, according to my real estate agent. Now the buyers won't look at the condos on the lake, and they go for less if they sell at all. I don't wish my plight to be visited on my neighbors to the east, and I oppose this expansion. Every lake owner in Fairfield that was within the 185 feet has registered a notarized petition in opposition to this expansion. And many others have signed the general petition as well. I hope that we can count on our aldermen to stand with us in opposition to LLS's expansion when this comes to a vote in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming to speak. Hope to pronounce it. Mark Barbeau. I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, do you pronounce it correct?
Ms. Phelps, would you like your picture back, or are you submitting
sure.
that?
Thank you very much. We love it.
Mr. Barbeau, welcome.
Thank you. Mark Barbeau, I live at 13117 Mason Bend Lane. And I have to tell you, first of all, that I'm very excited to learn tonight. I live in a mansion. I had no idea, and I appreciate the insight. So I'm in the house probably closest to the new development. And my wife and I moved here last summer. We grew up in St. Louis. We moved away 38 years ago. And we came back and we wanted to, we had to decide where we were gonna live in the city, or, in the area. And we decided we wanted to live in town and country. And we decided that because of, it's beautiful, okay, it's a beautiful city. But also it seemed, there's a pretty clear priority of residents over the developers in this area, in the city. And the city does a very good job of prioritizing, the aesthetics and the bucolic nature of the city. And, I appreciate that very much. And so, as you can imagine, getting there, getting the notice within a couple of months after we moved here that there's going to be major expansion at Mason Point, that was very, concerning to us. We walked over there. I knew we moved right next to Mason Point, and we walked over there and took a look at it. And we realized, that it's there. But I looked at it and said, this, I could attach to this, like this. We had no idea that there was going to be a major expansion. I went to the meeting Mr. Redmond hosted at Mason Point. I appreciate the information they gave out, and I could tell that it was heartfelt. Asking for our input into the development. But one of the comments that he made was that it was important for the residents to support this expansion because we didn't, nobody wants to have the Mason Point facility get into financial trouble or to go under the way the previous operation did. And he made a comment along those lines, and maybe it was blown up, maybe it came out wrong, but I heard that and I thought about it some more, and I realized, that's not my problem. That's the problem with LSS. LSS is really large, as you heard earlier, it's a $250 million revenue company. They have $1 billion of assets on their balance sheet. They've got, 10 facilities like this. This is a sophisticated business. This is not a mom and pop charity. And, I appreciate the fact that they want to make this thing more financially viable and, to make it bigger and, and better. But, that should not come at the expense of the neighbors. This thing is going to be, it's right outside my house. It's very large and very tall, and I would appreciate your support in voting against this. I cannot imagine that there's not a backup plan here that fits within the neighborhood that's a more modest facility. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. Next, Greg Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Aldermen. My name is Greg Waters. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I've been a town and country resident for 16 years, going on 17 years.
Interrupt just 1 second.
Yes.
They need for the record your address.
I live at number 6 Claycrest Drive,
Fine, thanks.
town and country.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, sir, no problem. So I moved here from Chesterfield, and it was for all the same reasons a lot of other people stay here so long. The big lots, the privacy, the trees, all of those wonderful things that the community has, and it's really more for the country of town and country than it is the town and country. I'm here asking for consistency from the board tonight. The board, as mentioned earlier by Mr. Carmody, has rejected, the proposals by Clarendale and Maria de Villa for their expansion. It was obviously going to be an increase in traffic, light, noise, overuse, burden on public services. And that's the same reasons I'm here asking you to deny the expansion sought by LSS. At the end of the day, this is really about apartments here, in my personal opinion, that they're operating under the guise of care facilities. I just don't think it's consistent with the character of town and country. They've already got 6 senior living facilities, greatly overbedded, highest per capita senior living facilities for any municipality in the St. Louis County area. I just don't think town and country needs more senior living offerings. As town and country residents, we want to trust that our board are dependable or listening to, especially the neighbors that are immediately impacted by this. and to act in the best interest of those people they represent. As you know, the majority of the residents, as expressed or as seen by this turnout here and at the last Planning and Zoning Commission, I think speaks for itself. And I would like to ask that you take note and follow our lead. I appreciate your time tonight, and thank you again for allowing me to speak.
Raleigh Anderson.
My name is Raleigh Anderson. I live at 5 Mason Ridge Court. My wife and I recently purchased our home there, which abuts the Mason Point development. If we had known about the proposed Mason Point expansion prior to that purchase, we can also say that it may have changed our mind or affected the purchase price. Now, all we can do is oppose this expansion, just like many other town and country residents. To say that the land values of adjoining properties will not be damaged by the approval of this expansion would be an absolute falsehood. If things like unsightly yards and foreclosures can affect the real resale value of a home by bringing down the average home values in the neighborhood, what will sight lines, noise levels, and traffic from a massive 580,000 square foot commercial structure do to home values? What you have not heard is evidence that the Mason Point expansion will not adversely affect neighboring residential property values. No one benefits from the expansion except for Mason Point and LSS. The neighbors will pay the price. Help protect the value of this area and vote no to this expansion. Thank you.
That's fine. Mr. Anderson, thanks for your comments. We will take 10-minute break, and we will be at 9:10.
All those in favor have not spoken yet though, right?
All right, no, everybody who wants to speak will get a chance.
Okay.